I still remember the exact moment I realized my parents weren't coming to my wedding. It wasn't when the chairs stayed empty. It wasn't when guests started whispering. It was when my phone vibrated and my mother's message appeared on the screen. Your cousin's baby was just born. We're staying here. You understand, right? I stared at those words while standing in my wedding suit, surrounded by flowers, music, and people who believed this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I didn't reply, because what do you say when your parents choose someone else's beginning over your once-in-a-lifetime moment? My name is Ethan Miller. I was 27 years old that day, and until that moment, I still believed stupidly that I mattered equally. The venue was small but beautiful. My fiancée, Emily, had planned every detail herself. She believed in keeping things simple, meaningful. No luxury, no show, just love. Her parents were there, my friends were there, my coworkers were there. My parents' seats were not. At first, everyone assumed they were late. Traffic, someone joked. They'll arrive just in time, another said. Emily didn't smile. She knew my family better than they did. I walked outside, pretending I needed air. In reality, I needed space to breathe without feeling embarrassed in front of everyone. That's when my cousin posted the photo. A newborn baby. Hospital room. My parents standing proudly on either side of the bed, smiling like they'd just received the greatest gift of their lives. Caption. Welcome to the family, little angel. Grandma and Grandpa are so proud. Grandma and Grandpa. My hands shook. This wasn't an emergency. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a choice. They chose to stay. Emily came outside and gently held my arm. Did they say anything? I showed her the message. She didn't get angry. That hurt more than if she had. She just nodded slowly and said, "Okay, then we'll start. No blame, no pressure, just acceptance." That's when I realized something terrifying. She was already used to my parents disappointing me. The ceremony went on. I said my vows while trying not to look at the empty chairs. Emily's voice trembled when she said hers, not from doubt, but from sadness for me. People clapped, people smiled, people took photos, and my parents were not in any of them. At the reception, relatives asked polite questions. Where are your parents? Are they feeling okay? Such a shame they couldn't make it. I smiled. I lied. I protected them out of habit. They had something important come up. Important. Later that night, after the guests left and the music faded, Emily and I sat alone in our hotel room. She removed her earrings quietly. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For the way they treat you," she replied. That sentence cracked something open inside me, because it wasn't about the wedding. This had been happening my entire life. When I got into college, they said my cousin was smarter. When I got my first job, they said my cousin needed more support. When I struggled, they said I should be grateful for whatever I had. And when I finally built something of my own, a marriage, a future, they skipped it. For a birth that would have happened whether they were there or not. The next morning, my father called. "Everything go well?" he asked casually. "Yes," I said. "That's good. We'll see you when things settle down here." I waited. No apology came. Not even an excuse. That was the moment I stopped trying to be understanding, because understanding had cost me too much. I looked at Emily, sleeping peacefully beside me, and realized something else. This was my new family now, and for the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I stopped showing up for people who never showed up for me. The morning after the wedding, my parents called again. "Ethan, did everything go smoothly?" my father asked, voice overly casual. "Yes," I said. I didn't ask why they weren't there. I already knew the answer. They didn't think I mattered enough. "You looked happy in the photos," my mother said. "Emily seems lovely." I let the pause hang. My parents didn't realize that their absence didn't just embarrass me. It spoke volumes about how they prioritized everyone else over me, even on the most important day of my life. Later that week, my cousin posted more photos of the newborn. My parents were there in every frame, holding the baby, smiling, doting. Relatives commented on how proud they were, how amazing it was that the grandparents were present. Everyone noticed except me, apparently. I didn't comment. I didn't like the posts. I didn't acknowledge them publicly. I sat quietly, scrolling through the images, feeling a mix of anger and numbness. It wasn't jealousy. It was recognition. Recognition of years of being overlooked, of being treated as secondary, of living life in the shadow of everyone else. Emily noticed my silence. That evening, she said softly, "You can't keep doing this to yourself, Ethan." "I'm not doing anything to myself," I replied. "They've done it for me, for years." She shook her head. "I mean, carrying this anger around. It's like you're letting them control your life even now." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. I had spent decades bending to their rules, tolerating their favoritism, excusing their neglect. I had spent a lifetime trying to be the perfect son, the one who didn't complain, who stayed silent, who made sure everyone else felt comfortable. And now, at my wedding, at the very moment I was supposed to feel celebrated, they were absent. Again. The next few days, I started thinking differently. I started researching the family estate, revisiting old property records, checking inheritance papers. There was something I'd never done before. I started thinking strategically. I looked at land ownership, legal loopholes, old family trusts, and I realized something crucial. If they could prioritize my cousin over me, then they didn't value fairness. But the law didn't care about fairness. It only cared about facts, and facts could be used. One afternoon, I found it. A clause buried in a trust agreement that named me as the rightful inheritor of a small but valuable piece of property. It was under my name, no one else's. Not my parents, not my cousins, not even the lawyer had remembered it existed. I smiled quietly. For the first time in years, the sense of helplessness I'd carried began to dissolve. I wasn't powerless. I had just never claimed my power before. I didn't call my parents. I didn't tell anyone. I started planning. Not revenge for the sake of anger, but for the sake of finally showing them that their choices had consequences. That choosing one person over me, ignoring me for decades, would no longer go unchallenged. Emily noticed the shift. One evening, she asked, "You've been so focused lately. What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about the future," I said, carefully. "About what I own, about what I control, and about making sure that nothing like today can ever happen again." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She just nodded, trusting me the way only someone who loved you completely could. Over the next few weeks, I began taking steps. Meetings with property lawyers, checking zoning approvals, gathering documents. Every interaction reminded me that I had been underestimated my entire life. Every plan, every paper, every calculation was a quiet act of reclaiming power. And all the while, my parents went about their lives, thinking that I was quietly accepting their decisions, thinking that I was still the obedient son who smiled when he was overlooked. They didn't know that the tide was turning, and soon, very soon, they would find out exactly who was really in control. The first hint that things were changing came when my cousin's parents called. "I heard you're handling the property now?" her mother asked, her voice overly polite, like a trap wrapped in civility. "Yes," I said evenly, leaning back in my chair. "I am." A pause. Then, "We didn't realize it had that much value." I smiled faintly. "It always did." That night, I reviewed the trust documents again. The property under my name wasn't just valuable, it was strategic. Its location made it ideal for development. Roads, small commercial projects, even potential residential expansion. Every number and clause whispered the same thing: control. For decades, my parents had believed they controlled everything. The family, the inheritance, the narrative. And for decades, they had been wrong. Emily watched quietly as I laid out plans, notes, documents, and property maps on the dining table. "You're serious," she said softly. "I've always been serious," I replied. "I just never had the leverage before." The leverage changed everything. A week later, I got my first official call from a developer. Someone named Andrew Collins. Professional, calm, and respectful. He didn't care about family drama. He cared about legal ownership and potential. "You're aware of the property value and its location," he said. "We'd like to discuss opportunities with you." I nodded. "We can schedule a meeting." That afternoon, my parents stopped by, completely unannounced. I could see it on their faces. Curiosity, apprehension, a subtle fear masked as concern. "My office called," my mother said, trying casualness. "Something about the property." I let the silence stretch. I didn't need to answer. "My cousin's parents said," my father began, but trailed off. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm handling the property. I've had it in my name for years." The color drained from their faces. Shock, confusion, a hint of panic. You own it?" my mother stammered. "Yes," I replied calmly. "And the developers are aware. We're moving forward." Lily didn't come to see me that day. She'd been bragging about her apartment for months, how modern it was, how valuable, how secure. Now she understood something she hadn't before. Value isn't about appearances. It's about ownership, control, power. Over the next few days, my parents called constantly. Emails, texts, calls. They tried bargaining. They tried pleading. They tried reasoning. I listened. I smiled quietly. Nothing they said changed the facts. By the time Andrew Collins and his team arrived for a formal meeting, my parents had realized it themselves. The good son they had overlooked had quietly positioned himself in a place they couldn't influence. Sitting at the table, I laid out plans, proposals, timelines. Andrew nodded, taking notes. My parents lingered in the background, pale and silent. Finally, my father whispered to my mother, "We underestimated him." "Yes," she replied, voice barely audible. "We really did." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I had heard them. Their quiet admission felt heavier than any argument could have. That night, I walked through the house, alone. Cracked walls, leaking roof, dust in the corners. And yet, it felt alive, mine. Finally mine. For the first time, I understood the truth my grandfather had always tried to teach me. It's not about what people give you. It's about what you take responsibility for and claim as yours. Lily called later, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I didn't know." I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was angry, but because she had never understood me before. And now, she still didn't. "You always think you have to be quiet," she said finally. "You always. Wait for permission, no more." I said softly, "I don't wait anymore." It wasn't a declaration of revenge, not yet. It was a declaration of independence. I knew the real shift had begun. And once it was fully visible, my parents, my cousin, even Lily, would see that for decades, they had overlooked one simple fact. I wasn't powerless. And power, when claimed quietly and patiently, can be devastating. The first public fallout happened faster than I expected. It started with a family gathering my parents insisted on hosting. They framed it as a celebration for the baby, for togetherness, for healing old misunderstandings. I knew better. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to re-establish control in front of people who had always believed their version of events. Emily and I arrived late, not dramatically, just intentionally. The room fell quiet for a second when they saw us. I felt it, the shift in attention. For the first time, people weren't looking at me with pity or indifference. They were curious. My parents were already tense. My mother hugged Emily too tightly, whispering, "We're so glad you could come." I smiled. "We had a meeting." "A meeting?" my father repeated. "Yes," I said. "Regarding the land." The word landed like a dropped glass. Relatives leaned in. Conversations stalled. My cousin's parents exchanged nervous looks. Lily stood frozen near the window, her phone clenched in her hand. Someone asked, casually, "What land?" I didn't rush to answer. Silence can do more damage than explanations. My father cleared his throat. "Ethan is managing a small property matter." I met his eyes. "It's not small," The room shifted again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated facts calmly, cleanly. I explained ownership, development interest, legal confirmation, names and dates. No emotion, no drama, just truth. People listened. For the first time in my life, they really listened. My mother's smile cracked. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I looked at her. You never asked. That was when Lily snapped. So this is what this is about? She said sharply. Punishing us because Mom and Dad missed your wedding? The room went silent. I turned to her slowly. No, I said. This is about finally living with the consequences of your choices. My father stood. That's enough. No, I replied. This is exactly enough. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. Everything I had built in silence was now visible. The next week, things unraveled quickly. Developers backed out of preliminary talks with my cousin's side of the family. Plans stalled. Values dropped. People began asking questions my parents couldn't deflect anymore. They came to my house that evening, not as parents, as negotiators. We can work something out, my father said. A family arrangement. I shook my head. I already have one. With Emily, my mother cried. We didn't mean to hurt you. I believed her. That didn't change anything. You chose where to stand on my wedding day, I said quietly. I chose where to stand after. They left without an agreement. Lily didn't call again. Emily held my hand that night and said, You didn't become cruel. I know, I said. I just stopped being invisible. And that was the truth. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It didn't destroy them. It simply removed their power over me. And sometimes, that's the deepest cut of all. The days after the family confrontation were quiet. Too quiet for my parents. No calls asking for updates. No questions about the land. No subtle attempts to regain control. They had seen what they'd ignored for years. I wasn't someone they could overlook anymore. I spent mornings in the old house, walking through every creaking floorboard, every cracked wall, and every patch of sunlight that broke through the dusty windows. It didn't matter that the house was small, dilapidated, and overlooked, because now it was mine, not just in paper, but in presence. It was the center of my power, the anchor of my independence. Emily would sometimes sit with me, sipping coffee quietly, reading legal documents, discussing development plans. She didn't need to tell me I was smart, capable, or worthy. She had always known. And in that room, filled with dust and sunlight, I finally felt like myself. Lily never came. Her social media posts slowed. The apartment she had once flaunted lost its shine as construction delays, management issues, and declining value slowly crept in. She didn't contact me. She didn't need to. I could feel her realizing, silently, that appearances weren't everything. My parents tried one last attempt, an official meeting in the lawyer's office. They arrived with anxious faces, overly formal tones, and a desperate attempt to negotiate. I just want to find a fair solution, my mother said. We can work together. I leaned back in my chair, calmly reviewing the documents on the table. The solution is already in place, I said. And it works without your interference. My father swallowed. Ethan, you don't understand what this means. I looked at him with gentle clarity. I do. I understand perfectly. What it means is that the choices you made deciding who matters more, ignoring me for years, finally have consequences. And those consequences don't require punishment. They just require the truth. They left without protest, quietly, defeated. Not humiliated, not angry, but aware. They had finally seen who I was beyond their favoritism, beyond their negligence, beyond their control. I walked home through the quiet streets that evening, Emily beside me. For years, I had walked in shadows, trying to shrink myself, to stay unnoticed, to survive. And now, every step felt deliberate. Every choice felt mine. Every word I spoke mattered because it came from me, not because it was validated by someone who had dismissed me for decades. The old house stayed the same, still worn, still cracked, still imperfect. Yet, beneath it lay land that no one could take, development projects that respected my ownership, and a quiet sense of power I had never felt before. I finally understood something my grandfather had once whispered. They will measure you by what they can see. Let them. You only need to own what they stand on. I owned it all. Not through force, not through shouting, but through patience, strategy, and self-respect. The last time I heard from my parents, it was a message from my mother. Ethan, we didn't realize. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I looked out the window at the land stretching beyond the old house. The sun was setting, painting the walls in a warm golden hue. Emily squeezed my hand. I smiled. This wasn't revenge in the way the movies show it. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public shaming, no shouting matches. There was simply life corrected, quiet justice, ownership of my future, my decisions, and my worth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, not my parents, not my cousin, not even Lily. I had proven it to myself, and that was enough.